All right, welcome everyone. It is yet another AI Advantage webinar series from Momentum. I am so excited to be here. My name is Jonathan Carford. Some people call me Coach K, and I'm privileged to have our wonderful guest Warren Zenna on, with the founder of CRO Collective, and my man coming to hit up with me on from Momentum is Chris Mendez. I just want to do a quick intro. So before we dive in, Warren, thank you for joining us. How are you, my friend?
I'm really good. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thank you. And Chris, always good to see you. It's our first time as one of our webinar attendees, but I had to have you. So here we are.
Good to be here. Happy
Yeah,
to exchange. Thanks for having me.
I love it. So, Warren, before we get into some things about Momentum, I'd love to have you do a quick intro about you and your history with this, and we'll kind of dive in.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I am Warren Zenna. I'm the founder of the CRO Collective. And it's not conversion rate optimization. That's not the clinical research organization. That's Chief Revenue Officer. And I started the CRO Collective about, got to be it's crazy, almost 6 years ago, which is crazy. And at the time, and I think still for sure, the recognition I had was that the Chief Revenue Officer role is a critically important role in the C-suite. In my view, it's the leader of the C-suite under the CEO for reasons we can get into. And that's not happening in the marketplace, and it's having a deleterious effect on the way companies are going to market. And it's only proven out to be even a bigger problem as we moved into the, more the profitability and mode as opposed to the growth at all cost mode. And so my company is focused on helping chief revenue officers develop the skills they need to do the job that way and help founders be ready for a CRO. So when they hire one, they actually make it a worthwhile and profitable relationship.
I love it. And you started this how many years ago now?
2019.
2019. So I've talked to several people, obviously, before we chatted. I was just like, hey, who's someone you trust in the space around the topic of chief revenue officers and that kind of thing? And your name came up at least 5 or 6 times from different people that I didn't know that knew you. But after I was like, I got to talk to Warren. So just want to say I'm so grateful to have you here. This is great.
Well, thank you.
Before we get into some of the topics, we got to have our lovely time for Momentum to kind of know what in the world we're doing here. So
Sure, yeah.
This whole AI Advantage, the whole purpose of what we're doing is to make sure we can showcase how leaders in the space are using AI to solve real challenges and make impact. So we've had Kyle Norton on, we've had Toby from Seismic, we've had a bunch of people from a lot of really cool companies, and we've all kind of deep dove into their respective specialties and areas of interest. And today I had to have Warren on to talk about the whole CRO because we haven't had that chat yet. So that's what today's about. Now, real quick, if I could tell you about Momentum, and this will be the hopefully 3-minute commercial. Mm-hmm. We're trying to solve what we're calling the go-to-market execution crisis, which usually shows up in 3 different ways. First way is the efficiency gap. Because of everyone trying to do things manually, there's a lot of things that takes up time that we don't think should take time. But sadly, a lot of people's current state is there's a lot of things happening. So it's taking the rep, whether it's CS or sales, away from being with customers and causing a lot of friction in the process. Then you have a lot of data siloed. There's nothing wrong with these different systems. It's just that they don't inherently integrate together. So a lot of data gets siloed into different places and you can't access it. And then thirdly is that because of these first 2 things, you lose a lot of insight and analysis and the ability to make strategic decisions because you don't have the data to do it in the first place. And the only way to get it is to talk to a sales rep in pipeline meetings every week. So we believe there's 3 core capabilities you need to fix this. For us, number 1 is having a structured first-party data provider. Our conversations, interactions with customers are rich with different types of content and data that most people don't have the ability to tap into and then to use and structure and then send to a system of record that can be communicated to the rest of the team. And so Momentum listens across the customer journey and structures the data coming out of those emails and calls and support tickets and whatever, and then sends them into your different records and then automatically communicates the right signal to the right person at the right time that's not biased and consistent, which is pretty important to know because sometimes messages can be biased just because of the person delivering them. And then lastly is this concept that we're coming out with more around orchestration, how both people and tech can work together so that the process can happen faster without having to wait on a human to enter in data or to move a stage or et cetera. So that's the 3 things we kind of rely on to give, obviously, what we call momentum to get speed and velocity around what actually moves the dial. So this is what we do. We suck all this information out and then move it over to the right people in the right time and automate the process so that you as a CRO and the rest of the sales or customer success people can focus on what's most important, which is the end customer. So with that being said, here's some use cases from different teams. As a result of this, you guys can read through this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. But the point is, especially for execs, is that you have a way to get a good pulse on what's happening across the org without having to be in every single call. So a use case I wanted to bring up was this one where if you think about sales leaders relying on delayed and complete CRM updates, if you have that, the impact of it is pretty substantial. Where you have a lot of things where momentum can autofill medic fields, or you can have a live pipeline view. You can really deep dive into any deal at any time for whatever reason, and you don't have to wait for anything. And it can scan information for signals or things that you as a leader might be concerned about. So some of these things are just, again, 5 of, I could think of at least 50 more that you can use, but that's how momentum helps this conversation. Now, without further ado, let's go over a couple of things. I wanted to go over a strategic mindset shift. How do elite CROs think about AI and strategy? And then this one. So I'm going to stop right here and I'm going to start with the constraints and challenges first. So Warren, we were talking about this a little bit before. What do you think the challenges are that CROs are going through right now with AI and strategy and the team going? What are you hearing?
Yeah. So the main thing I'm seeing happening with chief revenue officers, there still isn't a precise definition of the role. So, I talk to CROs, they have different versions of the job, right? And so because of that, it's hard to sort of codify the way a CRO should operate because they're not the same everywhere you put them. Now, someone could say, well, CMOs have the same problem. I don't agree with that. I think that, if you're a chief marketing officer, you run marketing and you're responsible for all of marketing. Now, you may structure your team differently, but that's your remit, right? Mm-hmm. CFO the same way. The CRO is still a nebulous role, and as a result, you get some CROs who run sales, like blatantly run sales, and you get a lot of CROs now that like maybe have pieces of the revenue engine, but not the whole thing. And as a result, they're sort of trying to figure out ways to coordinate a complex issue that's getting more complicated. That constraint is a big one because they are many times dealing with just trying to make a bigger impact on the business strategically, and they can't because they're constrained by the way the role is defined. And then on top of that, the other constraint they have is, on one hand, they're being told grow pipeline and get deals. The other hand, they're saying, build for the future. And those are very difficult things to do at the same time. Yeah, because they aren't really given a clear mandate. And so they have to pick the one that they can survive with, and it's usually closing deals. That's the thing they're going to survive on more than thinking longer term. And that the company suffers from that. So that's sort of like the constraints they're under right now.
Yeah. Chris, I know you told me once a week ago or a couple weeks ago, you've talked to more CROs in your last 6 months here than you've ever had before. What are you hearing?
Yeah, it's pretty similar. I think with the boards having AI initiatives or asking for what is the AI agenda, and the CRO being the person that needs to come up with that answer. A lot of times they're having to answer that within the realm of disparate responsibilities. Some CROs have RevOps that report to them. Some of them have centralized operations that report into the CIO or the CFO. And so the CROs, I feel like, are being asked questions that the answer or the execution to that are dotted lines into them, to your point, Warren. And so it's hard to build something for the company that may not be within the responsibility of your org. Now, what I see is, a lot of brave CROs trying to lead the way and lead the path, but it's harder to lead on influence than authority. You can do both.
No, completely. That's a very well put. And CROs are being asked questions and deliver responses to things that they don't have the authority to do anything about. And so what they're in a position is they sort of, we're dealing with human beings whom, look, these are people who on one hand, ambitiously and, ethically, they want to do a good job and they want to win for the company. On the other hand, they want to keep their job, right? So if I want to keep my job, instead of saying, hey, look, give me more power and authority and I'll get those things done, they say, yes, sir, no problem. I'll give you the answer you want. But they can really shoot themselves in the foot. They're really being put in a very, very difficult position. And, it's interestingly, it's really what I was saying this to Jonathan before, is, I think weirdly, AI like its ability to be a much more strategic overlay over an entire company, is actually bizarrely going to be a way for CROs to get out of that situation, because they're going to be asked to do things that are going to have an impact over the big picture. So if weirdly, I'm almost giving like a little hint here to a CRO, if you could be the AI guru for the company, you will win the authority that you need to have the control, because it's going to affect everything, right? They're not going to, you know, Jonathan, when you showed your diagram before about the problems that you're seeing companies have, and you were talking about the silos of data.
Yeah.
The silos of data are an outcome of the way we sell.
Right.
Okay. We created our own problem, because what we did was
Right.
we said, I'm going to sell to a marketing person because I have marketing software. And I'm going to sell to a sales leader because I have sales software. Right. And so what we did was we created software for a function. We didn't create software for the whole thing. We didn't.
Right.
And
Right.
so we have all this embedded software inside of these organizations that was designed to be bought by one person because it's easier to sell it that way. It's
Right.
less of a committee, right? So we sort of created a weird relationship between organizations that want to keep silos for their own constraints, and then sales organizations that want silos because they want to sell into them. So now we're all undoing a problem we created for the last 20 years. And it's really all of our fault. It's not anyone's fault. It's like we did this to ourselves. And so
Right.
Salesforce is probably the biggest culprit. I'm not blaming them for it. I'm just saying, like, think about it. The name of their company, it's like, let's sell the biggest piece of software in the market to salespeople, right? And, you know, it created a silo, a massive, like, $1 trillion silo. So I think the CRO AI is not going to be bought that way. It solves, you know, it's an ocean you're buying. You're buying a new Google in a way, right? So I do think that CROs have a unique opportunity here. If they can become really good at this, they could kind of work their way out of it.
What do you see is like, because some of the things you talked to me about, and I've heard this on multiple different people, that they're saying, hey, can AI help us with this? And I'm always like, AI can help enforce or speed up things, but it's not going to, it's not going to create your exit criteria for your sales process. Like, it's not going to do that kind of stuff that you as a team need to decide on what is important for your team, you know? So how do you balance the difference between where you get the fundamentals in place versus where you start to execute on AI?
Yeah, it's a weird one, man, because I got to tell you, I had a conversation with somebody last week, and you guys are probably in the thick of this more than me, who's really on the edge of this stuff. Like, he's really working with all kinds of crazy experimental things. And he was walking me through how he was able to independently build an entire strategy, but I'm talking like not just a strategy, like some superficial thing, but build using, you know, MCP servers and everything to create an entire email campaign that was designed very specifically to a very specific audience. And it was so detailed. It was shocking to me, like just how much this stuff is actually going to be able to do in some of those respects, you know?
Right.
And I think, yes, right now that may not be the case. But to give you an example, and we all know this, I don't want to say anything that sounds like I'm super smart here about this, because we all know, but I created my own AI product about a month ago that I was going to introduce to the marketplace. And it's old already.
Yeah.
Like, someone looked at it last week and went, yeah, this was cool last month. And they weren't being tongue in cheek. They were right. It's sort of, things evolved so quickly. So I'm answering your question is, I think that today, let's say like on what were we, April 28th, right? Yeah, you're right. Human beings still have to come up with a lot of stuff, and you still need people. Thank God, because I deploy people. But I do think that the machinery is going to be able to solve a lot of data integration problems and solve a lot of the silo problems that we have. I think where people are going to be needed is, you know, to deploy it, right? To put it to work, to put it to use. And that's going to be the interesting part, because I don't know if the BDR or the SDR is long for this world right now. I think
they should shift them. You think?
A computer, I don't know. I mean, we're spending a lot of money on these people, right? It's a big group of people we hire, and we spend a lot of money on to get, in my view, not really great results based on their work towards results. And I do think that if I can deploy a machine that can like talk to the market every day, 24 hours a day, not get tired and always be right about everything, it'll probably ultimately be more efficient at growing my pipeline than people.
Yeah.
But today, I think, you know, a CRO needs to sort of be like the, it's either the CRO or the RevOps person needs to be like the AI guru for the company and start really figuring out not what we can do today as much as what can we do like 6 months from now, because it's going to happen that fast. And where are the efficiencies that can come in? And where's the work that we're doing right now that's taking up all this time that we can remove and replace and connect as quickly as we can? Because what that's going to do is it's going to save you money. Your operational costs are going to go down, and your efficiencies are going to go up. And I think the good news is that for another year or two, people are still going to be needed to sort of implement these things. But I really do think that we're going to have pretty small companies in the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
People run companies like 3 or 4 people can run a whole business, you know. So I'm all rambling a bit here, but these are the sort of things that CROs are talking to me about. They're asking me, like, what do I do now in this situation, right? And I think that you've got to be both sort of like a futurist, but you have to also be sort of a presentist in that you have to implement things today and use AI as your in to buy more, if I would say, clout or more real estate in your jobs, that you get more opportunity to do more strategic thinking. Because I think CROs are being pushed into a corner, and I think it's to the detriment of them and the companies that hire them. So that's what I'm seeing across the board.
Well, you mentioned before that this kind of is a good segue into how people think about both strategy and then AI in general. So you said before how you're having this like mindset shift between how you used to think versus now what's possible now. Like what is that main shift that you recommend people are open for or can be, willing to be considered?
Yeah, I think that a knee-jerk reaction, I think it's going away, but for a very long time, the knee-jerk reaction was let's hire more salespeople, let's hire more SDRs, right? That was always sort of a solution to getting more pipeline and growing the business, right? And I think that's out the window now. I think that people see the inefficiency of that. And I think these tools are actually able to create more efficiency in the people that you have. So I think like instead of the recruitment angle, I think it's more like how can we like tech our way through this problem? Look at it less about everything's a nail, let's hire more people, but where are we really inefficient? Where are we not getting the most out of the people that we have? Where are the breakdowns? So I think that the shift in mindset is we can look in now more than we can. We don't have to look outward as much anymore. We can look into our systems and become smarter about our systems, and we can get more intelligence about our systems, and we can leverage that stuff better, faster now than maybe we could have. I see a lot of people thinking this way differently. And I also think too, CROs are going to get a lot younger.
Yeah, I would agree. What do you think, Chris? Because I know you have some thoughts on this. What do you think?
Yeah, I think CROs have to be a lot closer to the business and a lot closer to the technology, or else you'll be, so at the end of the day, sales will always be about the fundamentals. John McMahon always says like, hey, no one has arrived past the fundamentals, but how you arrive in that game will be a lot more tech savvy. And I hear that, I think I speak to 5 or 8 CROs a week. And what I see is a rush to build agents, a rush to supplement, to replace. And it reminded me of the gold rush in California, where everybody was going after gold. And I think
very, very apt analogy. I agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. And so watching this trend and how like what you're doing today may not be relevant in 3 to 6 months, here at Momentum, and this is something that I think all of us could see what flavor would benefit you. But if everybody's, searching for gold, sell shovels, right? And so one of the things that I picked up pretty quickly in these conversations is at the end of the day, agency is about a data problem. And so good agents, good data, it must mean, right? Bad data, bad agents. No data, no agents. And so being able to use AI to also solve the data layer that becomes foundational for building anything. If you're buying ready, if you're going to build, wherever you land on the spectrum of complexity around agents, if it's task, if it's automation and AI, or if it's pure agentic, wherever you are, if you don't have the data, you don't have much to work with, right? I think sometimes CROs buy, an example of that would be sometimes CROs buy these expensive forecasting tools that at the end of the day just help them miss very sophisticated. And when I listen to them, it's because the AI predictive index is making that decision on 30% of the data because there's nothing in the CRM. or
Yeah.
there's 25 words and it's cryptic. But if that AI engine had 80% of the data, then how accurate could it be? And so what I learned by speaking to them, Warren, is that it's more of a data problem. And I could only find out by getting close to the data. So I think people that are running organizations like yours, which are community-based, I think right now, CROs, VPs of sales, heads of sales, they should be speaking to their network more than ever before, or you're just going to be left behind because of the speed at which things moves. And so like you should be speaking, CROs should be speaking to each other right now more than you did before. You can't think, GPT is like porn and you're going to protect it. It's got to be this thing where you just expose it and you share it and you talk to your friends about it and you try to learn from each other very fast. Because if you're not close and if you're not in the weeds, because typically the CRO role is very high level, very macro, and you have people that you delegate and they become the minions. I think to your point, if companies do get smaller, there are levels that get shrunk. And if you don't shrink with the levels, you may find yourself obsolete.
Yeah, I mean, it was so many great things you just said. I was thinking about this while you were talking, because I agree with you that if people are digging for gold, you should buy shovels or sell shovels. That's the problem. I'm seeing almost the same point I made before, Chris, is we're always thinking about agents that can do our work for us that will get us customers, right? The agent is built to get a customer, or the agent is built to get a lead, or the agent is built to, build pipeline. But we should make agents that are shovels. And that's what I think is actually happening, is that people are building the shovels out of AI. Like, for example, I saw an example of this last week where, again, it was very sophisticated, right? I mean, most people don't know how to do this yet, but this person had a really great Claude setup with all the MCP servers, and he had some databases he had access to. And this guy was able to, right in front of us in a live setting, create a campaign that was so targeted that every email that this produced was at a level of relevance that there was no question that every email that went out to these people, the recipient would pay for the email. That's how valuable it was. It was so amazing, And that's like, in order to do that, Chris, he had to create the shovel that could create that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That the result of that was the agent part was I have AI building the emails and stuff right now, and they're really well written emails. But the data that went into the emails that was produced was the shovel that he made that learned how to dig, right? In a very specific way. And I do think that's the opportunity is, how do I, like you said, you're so right. And thank you. You're like helping me like grow my business with these comments you're making here. And that is like, you need to talk to CROs. You need to talk to each other because they all have ideas and they will share them, by the way. I'm having CRO roundtables like almost every month now. And that's all everyone's doing. So there's a big collaborative thing going on. Number two is CROs need to experiment, and they need to have, and they're probably going to get it because I think the founders and PE firms are hungry for it, some experimentation, right? Like an experimentation budget that's within reason where you can try things because you have to have a laboratory of sorts that you can do things with. But I don't think it should be focused on getting revenue. I think it should focus on solving your internal data problems and your connection problems. That's actually a better place to invest. Because once you figure that out, then you have a way that you can have the intelligence extrapolate ways to say, tell me how this matters most to my people. And what's a way that I can send a message out using this data that will make the most compelling case as to why it is that they'll talk to me. And it'll figure that out. But if you don't have that, like you said, the fundamentals first, you're not going to be able to do it. So there's going to be a period of time where the programs we run, which are the CRO readiness program, is going to continue to be really valuable because that's what we do. We help basically get all the data together, right? And using companies like yours to help us do it. But I do think there's going to be a period of time where it's all going to be sort of done already. I think, like, for example, you're going to buy like a HubSpot or a Salesforce, and these companies, they're going to embed this stuff right into their systems. So when you sign on to them, it's sort of doing that work for you in there in a way. And I see it already. I can see that happening. I just don't know like how long it's going to take. I think we're going to have a lot of regulatory and stuff like that going on with this. But I love that point, though. You're 100% right. The shovel part is where people are going to miss the mark. They're going to all think about trying to use it to get more pipeline. And I think you need your data together before you can do that. You do.
100%.
Totally agree. Well, I'm going to give you a hypothetical, Warren. I'm curious on something we've been contemplating here at Momentum with some stuff. But right now, most pipeline reviews obviously rely on the data from a salesperson putting in data entry and using then exit criteria and all these other things, right? So if there was a world where you augmented that with some sort of signal review versus a pipeline review, to where you both had signals externally, we had AI analyze their activity outside of the website and understand like they're looking for a competitor's pricing or they're doing whatever thing in third-party data, then you mix that with internal signals like from the conversations of saying,
Sure.
hey, their sentiment score of this was this much. So that then a sales leader, instead of having a pipeline review on exit criteria, would have that and all the signals to review saying, here's all the signals of all the stuff going on to add the exit criteria. And we know when these two things happen together, it's like 90% short of closing. Like, do you see a world where that happens more
No
often?
doubt. I'm seeing that already. I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
what Gong's whole business model was, and they're going to get there probably because they're already got a leadership position in this.
Yeah.
They have, you need to have a decent enough look back window. I mean, I think probably 2 years is a good amount of time to look backwards and say, I've collected enough sales call data that I could, now have some meaningful ways to, see what worked and what didn't work. But, we work with another customer, another client of ours, or not a client, a partner of ours, Ebsta, and they what they do is they look at Salesforce data. They look backwards 2 years and they're able to say, to your point, right? Okay, so when we take a look at the data going backwards in our Salesforce instances, and we look at the top 20% sellers in our organization, what's the sort of, let's say, like, what are the unique characteristics of the deals that they construct that make them close? How many people did they speak to? Who did they speak to? How often do they speak to them? Right? That kind of stuff. And when they start to make a pattern out of it, then they can go to their B players and say, you need to replicate this and you can get more closer to a deal. But you need a crawling agent to be able to look back and do that. Now, if I take that with that external data and I mix it together, there's no question you're going to get a much smarter model out of it. And then the third party is like things like, if I have access to a database of like previous purchases or historical data on buying preferences or sales figures within a certain industry or sector, I can take that too. And I can say, hey, look at these three things. Look at our behaviors that we see. Look at the pipeline that we built, the way the people are out there with their intent data. And then thirdly is look at these databases of purchase that are being done. What are like 5 different things, AI, that you think we can do with this information that might make a good strategy to go after these people? And it's probably going to come up with them. So I think like this is where it's going to get really, really, really interesting. It's going to think for you. It's going to be able to see things that we can't see. We don't have the data in front of us. We're not a human pivot table. I can't like flip it around inside my head like that. But if this thing can look at it that way and say, try these 5 things, one of them will be probably worth checking out. And you can say, I like number 3. That's a really interesting idea. Can we work on that one? Build it out for me. How would you approach that? What would it be? How would you do it? Well, we do X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, go ahead, do it. And I think that's exactly the way board reviews are going to look. I think I'm going to be in a boardroom and I'm going to be showing all this stuff and saying, here's how we're looking at all the data. It's not just like, well, we got 7 deals in the pipeline. They got this much money on the line. It's Bob Stevenson. He bought from us before. I mean, I think that's like really old school shit. I think it's going to be really intricate stuff. And you need a CRO who knows how to be able to articulate these things to people, And it's really fascinating. I can see how that can happen a lot faster with a lot less people. I continue to see that.
Totally. Well, I'm going to shift gears just to here because I'm curious. A lot of the focus right now, what I've heard from a couple of CROs is that they go to the board and the board's saying, we want you to grow revenue, no more headcount. And in fact, you got to reduce.
Yep.
So the whole topic of org structure is a big topic right now, regardless of size. So when you're having conversation with CROs, how do you balance this, obviously becoming more efficient and reducing headcount, but then the people are involved with it? Like, how do you balance the people with the tech and how you think about restructuring your team?
You mean like the human factor, like, the delicacy of letting people go and stuff like that? Are you talking about just managing resources?
All the above, all the way from letting people go to how do you strategically think about who do you keep and what positions are now important,
Yeah, great question. It's a big topic we have a lot. So first thing I would say is my opinion is, being a bit generalizing here, but generally speaking, I do think that pretty much almost everybody's overhired already. And the reason I say that is because 2 reasons. One is, like I said, there's a muscle memory around keeping to hire more people in your revenue operation because that's going to be the best way to grow your business. But number 2 is that We know that there is a crisis in efficiency. I mean, people aren't doing their jobs because they can't. They're in front of a dashboard 30% of the time, 40% of the time. And we haven't really done anything about it because we still are relying on them to have to do a lot of work that they normally wouldn't have to do 20 years ago. And that is enter data into a system. Now, we have agents and stuff that can listen to things and put it in there, but there's still a lot of time they're spending in these systems. And I think that right away, if I know without even having to do much research that if I have 10 people in my sales team, and each one of them is spending like between 20 and 30% of their time in a dashboard, I have not a people problem. I have an efficiency problem. And if I can make my people more efficient, well, then I'm not going to need that many people.
Right.
The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get them to become more at capacity. I'm going to try and get them at capacity. So what does that capacity mean? That means I have to define exactly what actions I know I want my salespeople to be taking every day. And if I know that those are the things and they're only doing that, well, then what are the things that they shouldn't be doing? And how do I get a machine to do them? Right. And I think there's a way to do that now. So that's one thing. And that's not a hard thing to sell in, right? I mean, it's easy to go to everybody and say, look, we can find efficiencies here. We can shrink our sales force down. Then you have that process. Then the other part of it is who do I get rid of? Is it SDRs I get rid of? I like them, They get me meetings, they're getting us meetings, they're getting us good meetings. We need good meetings. If I take rid of them, then I'm going to put that on my salespeople whom, unlike us three, probably we did that ourselves. I didn't have anybody doing that for me. I did my own prospecting. I mean, it's crazy. That's not my job. I never heard that before in my life. Well, yeah, but that's a different conversation. Is that if you got a bunch of salespeople that are accustomed to having people get them meetings, now all of a sudden they have to get their own meetings, you're going to see a dip in the capacity of their ability because they never did it before. So there's a training opportunity that has to go into play now. So I think there's a balance, right, between getting everything more efficient, which is why, again, I think targeting, ICP identification, right, finding real buying signals in the marketplace, those are the things that are going to help it down. And then on the firing and downsourcing side is, I'm seeing marketing departments are getting impacted by this again a lot now, because marketing has become sort of like its second wave of being marginalized because it's only a numbers game. I don't agree with that, by the way. I think it isn't. I think it should be more of a branding game, but it is being pushed into that corner again. And I think that people are removing people from marketing departments to save money. So these are the sort of problems I'm seeing right now because marketing suffers and they need it. So it's a big challenge, particularly when you're right, when they're being told to be more profitable. And then, of course, the CRO is like, well, I'm the most expensive person in this entire room right now. So, I mean, they're going to be gunning for my job. But the good news with that is that they're going to have to replace that person, and CROs are expensive. So it's not like they're going to get rid of you and save money. They have to replace you anyway. So you just have to be really good at your job, be very efficient with your job. But as you can hear from my answers, right, CROs it's harder for them to be strategic now than ever before because of all this stuff. They can't think long term. They have to think short term, but they're a long-term hire. So these are the constraints that they're under, and I'm seeing, I think AI, the reason why people are clamoring for it, I think they see it, and it probably is true, a way out of this problem. Make a more efficient organization, hire less people. Problem is, though, everybody's going to be doing it. So it's not like you're going to be cheaper. Everyone is going to be. So the bar is going to be lowered from the cost, right? So maybe in the beginning, there'll be a couple of companies who do it better than others, and they win the market by being able to lower their cost and make more profitability. But everyone's going to get on it soon. We're going to have a lot leaner organizations. And then, honestly, the good news, in my opinion, is what's going to have to happen is you're just going to have to have good products. Good products are going to win because it's going to be cheap to put a product out, right? So people buy things that work. People buy things that give them the value. People re-up and renew things that get them the value. So a lot of the shit we see in the marketplace right now isn't going to survive anymore. It's too expensive to have a shitty product. So I think the consumer is going to ultimately win in this whole thing. But I think it's going to be a while before we happen. It's too easy to get into the market right now. It's just too simple. So anyway, I mean, I'm all over the place here a bit, but these are the sort of these are the conversations I'm having with my clients all day.
I would add to your tech thing also people, because if you have an overabundance of people, that means the cream of the crop are going to rise up as the ones that people can work with because they know they can work with those people.
No doubt. You find people who are like problem solvers. They're high agency people. It's not an environment anymore for non-self starters. It's sort of those people are not
Yeah.
not built for what's going on right now.
Chris, I have a question for you because, like, and this is promised not to be self-serving, but Chris is relatively new as a leader here. So now that he's ran orgs of sales outside of Momentum, now he has it internally. I'd love to get from you, Chris. Like, what's the world you're seeing yourself in now? You actually have an AI tech doing a lot of this stuff in capacity. What's the difference for you?
Yeah, I ascribe to a lot of the things Warren said. There was one thing that I'm experiencing that maybe wasn't included in that conversation, and I think it's ratios. When you look at what could be the next practical step in this evolution, it's leader to AE ratios, right? You typically have these rules around 1 to 4.
Okay, yeah. I had that question asked of me. How many reps should be covered by a RevOps person? It's like,
Yeah,
it's a good question.
I think one of the things that the agents can deploy is a replication of what a first line leader would do. So think of call coverage, call coaching, checklists. A lot of the manual activity of a first line leader framework can suffer a level of sufficiency and efficiency where you could go to 1 to 12 very comfortably and still have the data with agentic support for you to be able to manage a larger team more effectively. I think we had one person, say, "I don't see why I couldn't manage 2,000 people" in one conversation.
It's a very good point, and I agree with that. I think it will be easier to manage more people this way.
Yeah.
So weirdly though, it's like, I don't know. It brings up a lot of stuff for me around this stuff because we still have to talk to each other.
Yeah.
I mean, do I want to be coached by an AI? I mean, I don't know, maybe down the road I might, but for a while, I was taught because there was someone sitting next to me who I had a relationship with, and he was amazingly good at kind of, infusing me with that sort of human magic that, I don't know if AI is going to replace it or not. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it will, but I don't know, my lifetime. And I think like if we're going to start deploying training and coaching and development out to a lot of people, it's true. It could probably be done, but should it? I don't know. So I'm not sure. It's interesting. It's an interesting one. I think we're going to see a lot of fascinating things. Even like having a robot watch your kids while you go out to the grocery store. I mean, that'll probably start happening soon.
Yeah.
There'll be laws passed where it'll be fine to have a robot that's designed specifically to take care of your kids, and it's okay. You're not abandoning your child. This robot is compliant with all the regulations, and it can watch your kid.
I mean, Tesla's have dog mode, right?
Totally. So yes. We're getting into a weird area, but it's very interesting. And I realize I'm sort of a salty old dude here, so I'm thinking about the stuff a lot differently than someone younger would. But
for sure,
I do think that we've been in this form for, they think around 250,000 years. I mean, we're not going to just remove our need for real interaction with our bosses and our managers in one decade. It's not possible. So, I do think while these things may work and we're looking at it from that perspective, I think there is going to be some backlash around human personality and human connection. I think communities are going to get really important. And I think for services like big enterprise sales, I think humans going out and having meetings, and I think it's going to still be critically important. I tell my clients all the time, you want to be relevant, be good at being in a relationship with people.
Totally. Yeah. A couple of examples, John, to your question. And I agree. I don't think that, the human brain has developed in such a way where those needs aren't going away, especially the emotional need and validation, recognition, significance. But one of the things that I see, because initially when you have these revolutions first, it comes in to be supplemental, helpful, and then substitution. And so in the practical way you implement something like this, it starts with insights. And then you have an abundance of insights, and it's an insight party. And then you have to decide, okay, which insight is valuable enough to take action that doesn't need me? And so then you have an automation. And then you want that automation to do another automation, and you have 3 steps of automation, and you want it to make the decision itself, and it becomes agentic. So I think it starts with that. And to John, to an example, for me, one of the things that really helps me with momentum, not to shameless plug, who cares?
Go ahead, go for it. Yeah.
Monday mornings, a lot of the times I'm looking to see, typically the best call for a leader to be on is first calls, because that's the type of call where you can it's typically in a sales org the the biggest drop off, and it's the one that gets the most neglected. And it's a great way to just like have visibility with first calls, and you can kind of have free pipeline.
Yep.
And so I get a Momentum looks at my calendar and my team's calendar, and it tells me here are all the first calls, and here are the logo, everything I want to see, size, logo, and title of the person coming. And that enables me to, it's insight, but it's automated insight, and it helps instead of me having to go tell the team to self-report or me look. Momentum just says, here they are. There's 12 of them. And then I get to pick which ones I want to deploy resources to based on, the conversations I think will yield the biggest ROI. Now, Momentum is learning. And when I start to learn what my pattern is, because I'm paying attention to it now, I'm feeding that into the model for it to also then say, I think you should go to these 4, right? And so it starts with simple things like that. And so also a call, I think you're right in terms of do I want, who wants to be coached by an AI? But so it won't start with that. It'll start with some kind of heat map, some kind of call score, some kind of checklist of things that I would do. So I'm replicating myself. I'm calling it the crispy agent.
Yeah, I like that. I do think though that there are going to be people who will prefer to be coached that way. There's no question about that. We're going to find all sorts of interesting little subcategories of people we manage. Like this person loves to watch videos and look at demos. This person wants a meeting with me, and okay, fine. So then we'll kind of do it that way. I was looking at something today. This is fascinating. So a woman was on LinkedIn and she was talking about how she has. She uses one of those personality profile matrices, these ones, there's like a bunch of them. And there's a couple of them that are better than others, I suspect, right? Maybe scientifically proven, but, let's say I'm like like I'm an EV2 and someone else is an OV1, right? And so if that's true, then my communication style is different than that person's, right? And so if I could codify that, I can put it into AI, and AI would say, this is what an EV2 means when they say X. So you can sort of translate my personality style for somebody else to understand. Vice versa, I can do the same thing with the person I'm talking to who's a prospect. I can say this person, right, based on their background, is likely this type of personality profile. When they say this, you hear that, but they actually mean this. And if you test it enough times, you could see that like you could actually translate, it's not English, it's personality style. And I think that's going to be a massive thing. We don't, there's certain people who are empathic. I'm pretty good that way. I can figure this stuff out. But some people just don't know how. They hear no and they hear no, right? So I think there's going to be some interesting ways that we're going to be able to start to learn patterns of behavior and personality styles and be able to create some ways to bridge gaps between that stuff. And I think salespeople will get a lot smarter. They'll go, what? I didn't think about that before. I didn't realize that the person could possibly mean something than what they said. Right. And so now that I know that, like a part of my brain's opened up a little bit, and maybe I'll enter that into a system now and say, here's a recording of the conversation based on this person's profile. What do you think this person was actually saying to me? Right. And if you do it enough times, you could probably get it right. So I think there is coaching and opportunity there for people who don't have empathic abilities. And I think it will actually make a difference. I think it will. These are things this stuff interests me a lot.
It is for me. It's because a lot of the times sometimes we coach on intuition or small sample size, and so it's not that aren't good at it. They know what good looks like, et cetera. But typically the opinions you have when you assess talent, typically it's to the sales process and chronologically. And you have these competencies that you score on, you have the team self-assess, and then you assess. But, I'll be honest, a lot of the times, most of my opinion comes from calls that I'm on, because nobody listens to calls anymore. Like there's a place for that. The use cases are getting smaller, but let's say there are managers that would watch this, and they listen to one call a day. They're going extinct because they would rather be on calls and make news versus get news. But think about how I come to an opinion. I'm on 7 calls with them. Right. But then AI can listen to
every call.
And
that's right.
And I think a lot of people also, because what coachability begins when you disagree. And sometimes your sample size is so small, it may not be statistically significant. But when you have AI to say, well, here's the data set of 1,000 calls, then it can be more helpful to uncover biases I have.
So here's the thing. I was thinking about what you just said, Chris, which is that the problem we have is that we can collect all this data, but human beings don't want to consume it, right? I don't want to listen to calls all day long. I record them all the time. I was on a call last week and someone says, "Anybody listen to your calls you record?" I said, "No, but I record them, you know." So you know, and it's an honest thing, but we all agree, we're all laughing about the fact that just because we're capable of doing something doesn't necessarily mean it's valuable. And I think similarly, right, human beings are the barrier. We're not the solution. So I was thinking about this. So when you think about full self-driving, right? When you're able to fully self-drive, and you know, I can understand the future of the fully self-driving AI, because what it really gets rid of ultimately, to be more sort of like a little tongue-in-cheek about it in a way, is it gets rid of rubbernecking. Because the robot's not going to give a shit that there was a bloody accident on the side of the road.
Exactly.
The robot's not going to pull over and go, "Wow, that looks really bad." You know, like we do that. Okay. And then we slow down 12 miles of traffic because we're fucking curious, you know? That's it. We're gore mongers. A robot doesn't care. It's like, I have a mission to go. I'm supposed to go this speed to this distance safely. And I don't care. So I think like these are the sort of things that we clog up the system with our humanity. And then sometimes it's needed, you know? And I think that's a balance, is figuring out like, where are we necessary and where are we getting in the way? And I think that's a really cool thing that we're sort of getting to figuring this out in a way, is like, where's the magic needed and where are we just literally, we should just not be in the room, you know?
Yeah. One of our core values here, Warren, is the whole concept of like, we believe that humans should be the source of data or data entry, but the source of relationships and excellence. Let AI take care of the rest. You can focus on this, you know?
Yeah, I think it could be a good thing. Anyway, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, this stuff fascinates me. So as you can tell.
Well, let's do this in the last few minutes.
Sure.
Merlin has a question. I have one for you too. So, for people who are listening, RevOps leaders or CROs who come on to listen, what is, do you think, one takeaway that's actionable they can do today of saying, no matter where you are, you need to consider this one thing? What would that be?
I would say do a couple things. Talk to other CROs who are using AI and ask what they're doing and how it's working for them. Like, take notes on it. Play around with these tools. I'm doing it right now. I'm in there hacking away at this stuff, you know? It is, and there's an overload of information out there about, you know, prompts and platforms, and it's easy to get caught up in it. But find people who do the same thing you do and how they solve it, you know, and then mimic it, right? And the other thing I think they should do too is they should start looking at all of the inefficiencies in their systems right now and figuring out ways to get rid of those inefficiencies, and they should be using AI to do it. That's a really good investment of this technology for them, because it'll do a couple things. It'll make everything faster. It'll make everything cheaper. And I think they'll probably get a lot less pushback when they make those two promises from the people that are investing in these things. I think it's a good thing that people will probably be giving you money for. So
totally.
You know,
I have a couple questions from the audience. So one's from Wayne. He said, what is the primary AI initiatives that boards are asking CROs to lead? And in your view, are these critical long-term success, or are they short-term fix? What do you think?
Everything short-term fix, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay, Chris.
Yeah, well, I heard one day it's coming across like you have to save 60,000 hours this quarter or this year.
Something like that.
Yeah, and to the, just like one thing that could be a hack to the listeners, Coach, is I like all the things you said, Warren, and especially about like community is big right now. You should really talk to other CROs. Yes. But here's a hack. If I could give you a hack, it's this: speak to people that are leading sales at AI first companies, because they are on the front lines of the revolution.
Great point.
And I'll speak from my perspective. You know, I have learned so much because I'm in a position where I get to be on the front lines, and then the network I have are also AI first companies. And so I feel like there's an advantage around the boot camp, this master course that I'm on, not because I'm smart or my hair is good. My hair is good today, but sometimes it's not.
Not bad. It's not bad. Yeah.
Mostly it's because of like what I'm privileged to see right now. And so if you have friends, or if you can speak to heads of sales, leaders of these AI first companies, they are a little ahead because their product, they're dogfooding their own product.
Exactly. They're building something. They're building the future right now, and they're experimenting with it in real time. Yeah. It's a really good
Exactly.
point. I completely agree with you. But everything is short term right now, Jonathan. Like
Yeah.
it's a real disease. You're very rarely, unfortunately, going to hear a board meeting where you're going to go out there and give us a 5-year plan. They're going to say, what are we doing next month, to get this thing going or whatever. And I understand that. I'm not being cynical. I understand the way that the business models are right now. So in that respect, I think the AI things that are being looked at are things that are going to solve those shorter term problems.
Yeah.
And those are going to be those sort of pipeline clogs, or identify bad deals, or increase our profitability this quarter, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but that is the case. I think also a lot of it is, aside from there not being enough long-term thinking, there's just a lot of unknowns. It's like, does anybody want to make a bet on a long-term AI play right now? No way. And what's going to happen in 3 months? It could be like, you idiot, how'd you possibly invest in that thing? It's antiquated at this point. So everyone's sort of waiting around. Like, I'm not going to buy a battery for my solar system at home, because 5 years from now, I'm going to be mad that I bought that crappy thing, because now I could have gotten one for half the price that can give me twice the capacity. So why am I going to buy one? So these things are moving too fast to invest in a lot of money. So you can toy with them a little bit. So I think that's part of it too, is it's still murky,
Yeah. Well, one more question from Merlin. We'll kind of wrap up on this one. So, business metrics and insights are really are finding it hard to stand on a peg leg. So, what is the perspective on using AI to retrospectively help legacy data into better insights to power AI of the future?
Well, as I said before, there are companies out there right now whom are, like, to Chris's point, that are working on this right now. They're looking at old data, and they're able to. I use this example. You ever saw Jurassic Park, right? So in the original Jurassic Park, they were the scientist in the room was explaining how they made the robots. What they were doing is they extracted, as you know, the DNA from the amber, from the mosquitoes and the blood.
Yeah.
But when they took it out, they found out that even though they knew it was a brontosaurus, there were pieces of the DNA that were missing. So they replaced those missing parts with frog DNA.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is frog DNA. I think what we're trying to do is figure out, like, what's the frog DNA in our data, so that we could turn it into dinosaur DNA. Because right now we don't know what that is, though. Like, we have to evaluate our data looking backwards and see what are the gaps that we filled in with guesses or assumptions. And how can we replace it with stuff that is true, and how much would it change, right? And I think we have to do that sort of an analysis looking backwards. You need a technology that knows what to look for, Yeah. Self-plug here. That's what my company does. We do that. We look backwards and we look at data and we fill those plugs, but we're humans. So, but there's, you need to do that sort of like analysis. It's really critically important, and there are ways to do it.
Yeah, and for Merlin, I did send this message in the chat if we got it. But Momentum does offer what we call a batch agents, where we go back into your past and we suck out all the data and we put it back into Salesforce for you. So whether or not you had Sales or Momentum during the time you had calls, we can go back and then get all the data and fill it in for you. So there's a lot of technologies that can do that, and you can work with someone like Warren, who can then take that data and actually do some sort of analysis with it and give you some good strategy moving forward, which is pretty cool. So, yeah.
Or even just like talk to that data. One of the things that I love about our own closed loss analysis is, well, the data is unstructured, to Warren's point. And there has to be the technology that structures the data so that the query is efficient, or else it hallucinates. And to be able to talk to the data set of closed loss deals versus X competitor gives you a level of insight at scale that never came up in a QBR. Right? I think I did this live in New York. I tell this story where we did. Oh, John, you weren't there for this one, but we ran what Momentum said around why we lost, and then we looked at what did the sales team say, and it was very different. Because through the lens of the human, that frog DNA is there's self-preservation. They don't want to take.
Exactly. It's all pathos. There's nothing real about it.
Yeah.
You hear it all the time in a sales report. Well, he sort of said yes. Okay, great. Thanks, Steve. That's really great analysis. This is the stuff that, the data could be smarter. It's not gonna rubberneck on this stuff. It's gonna go, no, he said no, or we don't know. But yeah, anyway, it's good stuff.
Well, Warren, before we go, for people to find you, let's tell us more that people can find more about you and what your events and all those things you're doing.
Yeah, Sure. Thank you. So on LinkedIn, you know, I'm twice as much of a blabbermouth there than I am here, which I know is kind of hard to understand, but I am. And so you can just, you know, DM me. I have every 2 months or so, we're having CRO roundtables, and they're getting better and better. So we're having one tomorrow, not tomorrow, on Wednesday in San Francisco. And then I'm having another one in New York on June 2nd. So you can DM me about that if you want to come. It's for CROs. And I'll probably have another one in San Francisco in September. And then I'll have one in Chicago in November. And I'll squeeze another one in New York sometime between there. So that's one thing you can do. Just DM me about them. I also have a thing called the Masters Council, which is for CROs who want to be in a group of 6 CROs to just talk on a weekly basis about everything. And those are good things. We run those. And then I have my CRO accelerator course for aspiring CROs. And we talked about it here as the CRO readiness program, which is for companies looking to build a revenue engine utilizing more data extrapolation and analysis, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the things we're working on. But thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Merlin just asked, do you do any virtual CRO summits?
Yeah, we do. We do.
Cool.
Yes. We're probably going to have one before the end of the year is up. Yes.
Cool. I'll make sure when we send out, I'll send the recording out to everyone. I'll make sure your LinkedIn is in there as well as the website. So I'll make sure everyone has it. I just want to say, everyone, thank you, Chris. Thank you for being here.
Chris, thank you.
Having another.
Yeah, really appreciate it. It was fun.
And Warren, much appreciated, my man. And thank you, everyone, for attending today. Appreciate
thank you,
all.
everyone. Bye-bye.